he's gone after 2 seasons there. He was a manager for 100 and or not 100, 222 games, the 60 game and 162. Nothing really to show for it. That's I think what kind of the problem is, and very questionable, not game deciding decisions, just decisions on, like I said before, who do I want to start at second base tonight? Do I want to put VR there? Or do I want to play Jeff McNeil there, or Jeff McNeil in the outfield? A lot of random sort of moves on his part. And then also, just a lackluster second half of the season where you blew expectations out of the water in the front half, or maybe a little less than half of the season, right before the All-Star break. And then it's just horrible baseball to finish the season. And rightfully so. I think that's why he's fired.
To look at this team, injuries or not, at the beginning of the year and say this is a team that's going to finish 8 games under 500, that's insane. To throw in the context of they were in first place for 103 days, and then not only did they not make the playoffs, fell below 500 and completely fell out of the playoff race. It can't happen. And we talked about it with the Aaron Boone conversation, right? Some of the onus falls on the players, but at the end of the day, the manager is the guy that's leading their team out there every time, right? Yeah. And to have a team with high expectations completely flop, I would say 2 years in a row, because I think the Mets had decent expectations in 2020 and also had a disappointing season. So to have 2 disappointing seasons, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think his managerial record with the Mets is above 500, right?
It's probably a little bit. It might be a little bit below, or maybe right around there.
But just even that, like to sit at 500 with the teams that he's had, he's thrown into a tough spot. He wasn't supposed to be the manager; it was supposed to be Beltron. But exactly. To get thrown into this spot with a team that's very talented and not even be able to finish above 500, I think it's an easy decision. You gotta let him go. You gotta find someone else that's actually gonna motivate him. I listened to him speak in press conferences, and I never thought he was the guy that's boring. He's boring. He's just it's empty words to me, and he doesn't strike me as the guy that really can strike a fire in a clubhouse. So they gotta go out there, I think, and find someone that can really motivate a team.
And then I guess you brought up Beltron, and that's I loved that idea for the Mets at first, because he was a guy who played for them. Of course, was great baseball mind. A player turned manager is something that you see, I think, more so in baseball than in any other sport. Is it possible that they could take Beltron back after what happened, or do they have to kind of just go in a different direction? There were some names that came up. I'll let you speak on the Beltron part before I give my opinion, but do you think Carlos Beltran could be a name that pops up again, or is it just going totally away from him?
Here's the Beltron got a really crappy deal when you look at AJ Hinch is still managing, and Cora, who wasn't as big of a cheater, is still managing, and that's fine. I think they should be able to manage. And it feels like the only guy that got really, really punished besides the GM of the Astros is Carlos Beltran, which doesn't make it's tough. And I don't think the Mets personally will do it, just because they've already hired him and then had to let him go once. I don't think they'll go through all that drama again. That would just be an odd look. And I do think the Mets are considering optics when they do this move. But I'd like to hear some of the guys that you would consider for this Mets managerial position.
I'm really looking at one guy, and I think it's just because for me, obviously we are not professional league offices in those offices making these decisions for a reason. But I get very set in stone when I decide, I think that could work. And call me crazy, but the pick is Buck Showalter.
See, I'm glad you said that, because for me, Buck Showalter is the one guy that I feel like should still have a job managing. Yeah. I'm going to be selfish. I kind of hope he becomes the next Yankees manager.
That was
kind of my – he's working for Yes right now. I hear him do analysis every once in a while. I love the man. I think that you look at some of the teams, he's kind of set up teams for success. It's always the joke. He takes an underperforming team and takes them to the next level, and then someone else comes in and wins the World Series with that team that he set up. But I love Buck. I think that's a great move.
I picked him because of really just the sheer experience. The Mets, I think, need that, because Rojas is not a guy who, when you're in the trenches and need these wins, I don't think he's a guy you can kind of get behind and follow. And it showed, I think, these past 2 seasons. But Showalter, obviously, too. He was the manager with the Yankees in the early 90s. I would like to see him back with the Yanks too if we get rid of Aaron Boone. But that's another conversation. I think with the Mets, again, they need a guy who's experienced, who's turned teams, like you said, from subpar to good, or from good to great. And that's what the Mets, I think, kind of fall into both of those categories depending on how they play. But I really think with him too, he managed teams like the Orioles, who were not really that talented, but had some guys, Adam Jones, JJ Hardy, and they took them to the playoffs in the AL East, which is always one of, if not the most competitive division in Major League Baseball. So with a guy like him, I think it's really just a different sort of grit and grind, old school approach to the game, which is what is forgotten too much, and which is what I really think is needed as a whole.
And listen, right, it's kind of been the new trend. Like, let's hire these young guys, and it's worked to some part. We've seen Cora, great manager, one of the best in the league, but also like Tony La Russa rehired and takes Chicago. They win the AL Central easily, and now they're going to look to make a playoff push. And the great thing I think about Buck is that he's a solid mix of both. Like, he does look at the analytics, he does look at the new way of thinking in baseball, but he retains some of that gut feel. Like, he's not just going to be a puppet for a GM. And that pertains to us because we've heard that about Aaron Boone. He's just a puppet for Cashman, whatever. Like, Showalter is going to make his own decisions, and he's still going to listen to gut feelings and baseball, hot and cold. Some of the stuff that the analytics kind of shoo away is, oh, hot's not a thing, cold's not a thing. I personally think that they are, and Buck does too, and I think he brings the right blend of both those concepts.
And